Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this Monday morning.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And let's assess how the country's doing with the lockdown. Are things getting better? Are they getting worse? Or do we have a long way to go? We're going to dissect all that out, and we will search and search and search for some optimism, because the other stuff pops up all the time. But there's a few bits and pieces of optimism that are popping up, even in the regular media. That's good. Maybe they have trouble denying science. Maybe they will accept science one of these days. But nevertheless, I want to talk about Texas. We're so familiar. We know everything that goes on in Texas. And some days the image of Texas is really very good. They think we're just astounding. And Texas compared to what? Compared to New York and California.
Yeah.
Yes, we're getting a lot of people, especially from California, which makes me a little bit nervous. If they come because of our leanings toward a free society, that's great. But if they're coming with the attitude that, yes, this is good, there are opportunities here, it's a rich state, but what we need to do is get their social policies improved. And that, some people will say that's a joke, they wouldn't do that, they're trying to escape it, but that isn't the case. It's happened, up, in New Hampshire and Massachusetts and other places, that some of the people, when they get disgusted, when they drive their cities or their towns or their states bankrupt, they go to a neighbor in city or town, and they do the same thing over there. So you never can let the guard down. But the reason I wanted to talk about Galveston, it was brought out and it made some of the regular media, but it certainly made it into the internet and the social media, and that had to do with an arrest. Some people called it police brutality. But it's an interesting story because it raises a few questions. It isn't so simple. Somebody did harm, you needed the police came, and they arrested the individual, and everybody was happy. Far from it.
Yeah.
It was a little more complex than that. We had an arrest of a woman. She was yelling and screaming, and it started off, the video's available, started off being pretty soft. Before we knew it, there was a lot of wrestling and back and forth, and a lot of film on this thing, so you can, people who watch it can make their own judgment. But she did scream, holler, she was being hurt, and I think the x-ray shows she did have a broken foot, and she was shouting. She was 65 years old. And one thing interesting, she thought maybe if she looked like she was in great danger, maybe she would get some help. But that's a tough one. When do you think it's proper? If you don't know what's going on, when is it proper to go and interfere with the police? So that's a difficult one, but in a moral sense, I'm sure she felt justified at begging and pleading for some help. But I want to go into that a little bit, and then also talk about, the principle of private property. Whose property was it? Was she allowed? But the whole issue was the mask. She wouldn't wear a mask, and she wouldn't listen, so therefore she was a very, very bad person. And yet those who perpetuated the problem and expanded the problem said that they were on the side of righteousness. The mask saves people's lives, and it was all done on private property. So they made her look like she violated a lot of rules. But we want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, the Abbott likes to now brag, Texas is 100% open, Texas is 100% open. The reality is the damage has already been done. He's had a mask mandate in place since July, and people have become psychologically addicted, I'm convinced, of wearing this mask. And even with the mask mandate lifted and the governor bragging about it, you still see huge percentage of compliance, certainly down here, even in Brazoria County. But Terry White is the woman's name, and she had a bank account in Bank of America in Galveston. She did not like their mask policy. She did not like the fact that they refused to change their policy, even though the state had changed its policy. So she went in to close her account out. According to her recounting of what happened, she was driving a rig, which I'm guessing was a truck. She's a truck driver, maybe. She couldn't get through the drive-through in that case, so she went in because she wanted to close her account. She patiently waited in line without a mask on until she was the very next customer. And then she was accosted by the bank manager, and they told her she had to wear a mask or she would be kicked out. This is private property. She said, I just want to close my account. They called the police. The police came in, and we actually do have some video of the arrest. The woman was arrested. Yeah, she was a little bit belligerent. She was unhappy. She's probably sick of waiting in line. But let's watch a couple minutes, couple seconds of this video if we can get it queued up.
Do not touch me. Who do you think you are?
2010, one
Oh,
resisting.
back up. Some old lady is getting handcuffed here. Here, people. Ow.
Ma'am,
Are
put
you-
your hands behind your back. Say it. You don't stop resisting. Stop.
Are you gonna, is anybody gonna, like, get real here?
So it looks like at that point
Yeah.
her foot was broken as she was being arrested. And so yeah, you're saying they're difficult issues, private property,
Right.
proportionality.
You know, if you listen to what she said, technically she's right on her arguments, you know, about the mask and they aren't what they're supposed to be, and there's the whole shutdown, the lockdown is exaggerated. But the part here that becomes interesting is the property rights issue. Because remember when Abbott issued his statement, you know, he made exceptions. First, local communities, school districts, and everybody else, they were exempt. So the people who had become addicted to them, they could go about and do it. And so therefore, and he was going to be very Texan, and you know, private property, you can do with it. So they're absolutely right about that private property, you're supposed to be able to do with it what you want. But what bugs me on this is the ridiculous inconsistency. They don't give a darn about private property, because just look at what they do to private property. What about this bank and the store and restaurants and bars and all? Is that private property? No, the government has 1,000 regulations on it. They tell you who can come in and what they can wear and how much they get paid and all these things. There's so many regulations. And but then what about the forcing of lockdown?
Yeah.
Did they complain about a violation of property rights then? No, but they're saying now that, and the police used it as the argument, this is private property and they want you out, so you have to leave. So there's a technicality there that says, yes, you're correct, but under this, when you look at these circumstances, all they're doing is a reaction to the abuse of private property, which had been going on for years. That's what lockdown is all about, is the interference with our personal liberties. But it led to this, and she was determined, and some could say, you know, there's a different way to approach this, but sometimes people feel very desperate and they want to call attention to it, and I think she achieved her goal, but immediately they're going to write her off, and they still could have done that. But the part where they're going to look bad is seeing, I don't know whether it was 1 or 2 cops on top of her, beating her, and she broke her foot.
Yeah.
And that's a little extreme for not wearing a mask, which is a personal liberty, and maybe that was inferred by the fact that she went in there and put her money in the bank without a mask.
Yeah,
you know? So why is it to take it out? So it was something that really put a bug in them, and it's weird because things are getting better. People are becoming more tolerant. They're more understanding. They're looking at the problems with lockdown. Everybody's conceding this. Yes, it's a lot better in Florida financially and liberties as compared to California. At the same time, why we had to see this happen, it gives Texas a bad name. It eliminates some of our image making, you know, we're the great state of personal liberty. But hopefully this is an isolated incident, but I'm not sure that it is, because we've been complaining about a few other regulations when they were being put on. We were complaining about it, a violation of property rights. But I find it rather ironic that they use property rights argument to prove she is the monster, not the state.
Well, hopefully the market will also speak. In fact, I ran into a woman who sees things the way we do, that we know from other places, and she said she immediately after that she went and took her money out and closed her account on Bank of America. So hopefully people will do that and let them know why. But you know, the original executive order that Abbott issued back in July itself was, as you say, an assault on private property rights, because what it did is it forced all businesses to be cops. Every business is forced to put a sign up on your window requiring masks if you can't social distance. and they did that. He wants to have it both ways. He wants to take credit. He wants to be DeSantis without being DeSantis, and I think he's more than happy to see these businesses take over and continue the mask policy. But Bob Wenzel, who put this up on Target Liberty, who's of course great on these and many, many things, but he made the point that you did, which is there's a sort of a libertarian argument that the inconsistency in the at least implied contract, when she went in to open the account, there were a certain set of circumstances under which she could open it, but now they changed it unilaterally and she can't go in and close it with the same circumstances. Now you have to wear a mask. He also says something else. What happened to accommodating the customer? This is one customer, she waited patiently in line. Couldn't the manager have taken her somewhere and quietly dealt with this? No, they wanted to make a big stink about it. And here's a great quote from Bob Wenzel. He said, "This is the current state of power freaks, getting off wielding power. It's a form of cheap sadism, and it's hard to argue with that assessment."
Yeah, and the question that should be raised, and you essentially raised it, what danger did she pose to society? The danger came from the previous lockdowns, which turns out doesn't make much sense. There's a movement in the right direction, and all of a sudden now they have to go through this extent because she is evidently so dangerous, but she is dangerous in one way to the status quo of authoritarianism and the sharing of this authority with business and banks and government, and that's who's threatened, and this is the reason they had to stop that, because they believe so strongly, and maybe deep down in their heart. Too bad they don't have it deep down in their brain. That lockdown, is something that is very, very important, and they want to do it. And but you'd wonder why they do it. They just don't seem to see the world the way we do, and we'd like to persuade them.
Yeah, it's getting so weird. Our local HEB, which is the beloved Texas institution, it's headquartered out of San Antonio. It's so weird, Dr. Paul, because after the mask mandate was lifted, they've actually gone full circle. They put up new huge signs. You must wear a mask. You must wear a mask. They put a guy out front trying to give you masks. And in fact, if you walk in without a mask, which to their credit, they don't hassle you. But if you walk in without a mask, he's taking a little tally of how many are going in. And I don't know what the purpose of that is, but it's strange that they're actually doubling down on their people and the poor employees, these young people that are working at the store being forced to wear these masks for 8-hour shifts. It is really inhuman, and sadly, HEB, I don't know what the problem is, why they're doing this, but it's
yes, and we keep hoping things will move in our direction. I think the people are moving our direction, but we have this collusion of business and government that play this role of authoritarianism. That's still alive and well. But there was also a short clip here. I don't know how significant it is, but it wasn't exactly good. Mask stay. Texas loses at court. Austin's mask mandate to stay in place for at least 2 weeks. Yeah. Why did they go through court? And, okay, we got you for 2 more weeks. Yeah. But it's just the fact that they go through this ritual, and when you look at the evidence, there's whose life is going to be saved. But it really builds confidence and in the authority, and people believe they're there. They're not going to go away, so you better adapt. And a lot of people are doing that, whether it's philosophically or whether it's just emotional. And you suggest it could be emotional. Psychologically, they get adapted to this, and they feel it's sort of like some people wear hats a lot, and they can't go out of their house just as a habit. So right now they're kind of but of course, the real tragedy is when you see the conflict with the children. And I think the basic instinct of a child is to be free. Yes. And good adults and parents modify that and turn it into positive energy. But they end up in a real turmoil, because this is the opposite of developing skills and restraints and social conditions that are more worthy, because they get so upset. And the reason I can emphasize that is we just happen to have a large family, and we hear some personal stories that aren't very nice.
Yes. Well, we want to sort of move off in a related direction, and this is something that caught our attention, written on the American Institute for Economic Research website, and it's written by Edward Peter Stringham. who I believe is the president of the Institute, and it sort of caught our attention. The 1 year anniversary of lockdowns was the article's title, and it was pointed out that about a year ago, between March 13th and 16th in 2020, began this rolling out of lockdowns across the country, with one exception, of course, was South Dakota. But with that exception, every state is interesting because he points out a federal document issued on March 13th, 2020, and declassified 3 months later, gave the guidelines for the lockdowns. People panicked, governments panicked, everyone panicked, and the lockdowns happened. It's been a year ago, and the point of the article is it's time to go back and take a serious reassessment. And here's something important that he pointed out, and these were the experts at the time of the 57-58 flu pandemic, which was very, very deadly. They decided that they're not going to take away people's rights. They're not going to do anything that happened. And here's what the officials said at the time: there is no practical advantage in the closing of schools or the curtailment of public gatherings as it relates to the spread of this disease. They did the same thing in 68, 69 when there was another outbreak, in 2006, 2009, and 2012 and 2013. And what Stringham, the point he makes in this is that we as humans have always lived with pathogens. That's the nature of life. All of a sudden now we have this idea given us to us by these people that somehow we can live a life free of pathogens.
You know, in a sense, I look at what we do is we're trying to figure out where we are and where we're going. See, on the one hand, you know, the people are waking up and the rules are lightening up. On the other hand, we have the people really buckling down to defend their right to put masks on everybody. And it's the old question, you know, is the glass half full or half empty? And I sort of, it's in the middle. It's not like they have total authoritarian control of it. But when they have the principle, I think that principle, they own it until you prove to them that, you know, telling people to wear a mask has not been a benefit to anybody other than to take care of the emotions of the authoritarians who feel like they've achieved something. And that's going to continue. But it's what we do and others do and what the people do and how determined they are. And you say, well, you're not going to get anywhere with somebody like that woman, that 65-year-old that goes and gets arrested and gets her foot broken. They're too powerful. You can't fight them. Or are you going to you know, fight them in different ways? And I think that it's going to be different. People have different emotions, but the point that we want to get across is there is a position to hold, which is a moral position, it's a constitutional position, it's a good economic position, and it doesn't involve, you know, the forcing little kids to wear masks in school, which and closing down the economy and putting people into bankruptcy and then rewarding some certain companies instead of the people who went bankrupt and are unemployed at the moment, even though they all got a check this week. You know, it's something that people have to look at and decide which side are they on. And unfortunately, it's hard to sort it out because they've been conditioned, because it's been incremental for the last 100 years. We've moved in a direction that the government's there to take care of us and make us safe and secure, and make us feel good now. Yeah. That's the other thing. And if you don't do right, we'll take care of it. We're going to get rid of the bad people who write bad books and you know, undermine our society. So that's our job, and we're going to do it. So we're really in a dangerous periods of time. Which way we're going to do? Are we going to fill that glass up a little bit more with liberty, or are we going to continue to shrink?
Well, you know, this is a sober article, and I'll put a link to it in the description. It's not a victory lap, but he does make a very important point. In AIER, to their credit, they were the host of the Great Barrington Declaration, which came out in October. And if you remember, even mentioning it would get you banned from social media, would get you censored and all of this. But he points out that it was a breath of fresh air. He said a year after this terrible experiment began, it's almost time to declare a narrow victory. The declaration was right, and that is true, and the lockdowners were wrong. The lockdowners are in retreat, just as is the virus, in exactly the way that the author said it would, through the acquisition of population immunity via natural exposure and vaccines. They turned out to be right, even though at the time they were anathema.
You know, and we have to realize that this is just not a Texas problem or a United States problem or an American problem. It's somehow been extended to engulf the whole world, and I think so. I think in many ways unnecessarily, and. Today we also noticed something that was going on in the Netherlands. I mean, the ruthlessness, and evidently other countries, when we complain about what happened to this woman and others and police brutality, it's significant, but I hate it when it's exaggerated and decided that there was a military coup on the 6th of January and I missed it, that sort of thing. But the little video they showed from the Netherlands had to do with somebody I think it was a
peaceful protest against the lockdowns.
Yeah, and they turned the police dogs on this guy.
Yeah, in fact, we have a clip of it. Let's take a look at a couple seconds of this. It's pretty rough. You may not want to watch it completely, but this is a peaceful protest in the Netherlands against the lockdowns. We get a full screen that, can we?
There it is.
These people are unarmed. The dogs are attacking them, and then the police come in, and 2 or 3 of them.
They beat the guy and let the dog go get him.
Yeah, so that's. So can you imagine if this was Iran or Russia or somewhere the U.S. or Hong Kong, what the U.S. would say? How dare you beat these peaceful protesters? But apparently it's okay in liberal Holland as long as you are protesting peacefully against lockdowns and crackdowns.
We're at some critical points on some various things. I think the percentage of people who are waking up and they don't want to use the mask are speaking up. Before it was thought you had to do it. It was health. That's the rule, the laws, and they weren't willing to take it on. But we do have numbers now that shows that more people want it, and the states are accommodating to some degree, and sometimes they try to trick us, say, oh, we're doing it, but we're really not doing it. So, but there's statistics to show that people are sick and tired of this, and the facts are coming out about one positive fact of understanding it is realizing that if we narrowed our concerns about those individuals in nursing homes, we would have been a lot better off with the terrible mess in New York of how many people died because they were forced into nursing homes. That's an important story. But I think there's also more stories now. We have not ever taken a position of saying, don't take a vaccine. You must take a vaccine. The libertarian position is to look at and decide, read the history of vaccines, and but you're allowed to express yourself. You should never be forced to take it. So, but right now there's a growing resentment, and the left goes nuts. That I think it's 20% of the members of Congress. I'm surprised it's even that much. 20%. Of the congressmen won't take it. Oh, that is a crime. They should be expelled, for not taking the virus shots. What's that going to do to the profit line of somebody making this stuff? But then there's these other things of how many people are dying. The reports, I don't even like to read them. And just this weekend, there were a lot more reports out on the complications from the vaccine. And the reason I don't cite them and say, 150 people died last night from the vaccine. I don't think we know that yet.
Don't know,
because it's a mixed bag. Because even many of the elderly that died, they say all died from COVID. Well, maybe they died from a combination of having the flu and heart trouble. So it's not very scientific, and yet they're the absolutists. If you don't believe them, you're rejecting science. But there was 2 cases of people dying after they had the vaccine that sort of caught attention. I think they had to do a little reporting on it, but it's so sad because they were doing it more or less extending themselves because they were dignitaries and they were well respected to encourage people, especially minorities, to take the shot. And that was the death of Hank Aaron and also Marvin Hagler. And they were healthy young men, really. I mean, not young in everybody's sense, but 60s, I guess, and maybe 70s. But anyway, they died from this, and yet the reason we can't say, like I said, you don't know whether that is the whole story.
Yeah.
But there are people who have put a lot of effort into studying it and knowing exactly what's in these vaccines that can cause something like this to happen. But it's something that has to be studied. It's going to be studied. Eventually they'll know it. But when? Is it going to be, will it be acceptable to have a real honest discussion of that on CNN? You know, with two people on there and talking about the pros and cons of vaccines. That's the problem, because why get in there? Why to go into debate? We know that it's been, science has settled it. And who designed the science? Oh, Fauci and CNN, MSNBC. They have a lot of authority over those definitions.
What's annoying about it is the hypocrisy. As you say, if an elderly person with 4 or 5 comorbidities also testing positive with the PCR test for COVID-19, if that person dies, it goes in the COVID death list. But if a person goes in and has a couple of comorbidities and takes the vaccine and dies, well, that can't be related to the vaccine whatsoever. It's got to be one or the other, you know. And as you say, what we need is an honest debate, and we're not getting it yet on this issue. But if do you want to do some short ones, or do you want to move on to Florida? Or
let's do Florida,
okay,
because we
need
probably
some
run
good
out
news.
of time. But we'll do some short ones though. But let's do Florida, then we'll go to these
Let's
short
just go to this next clip, because we need to cheer ourselves up at this point. I'm getting a little bit depressed about all this. Look at this, Dr. Paul. Ron DeSantis, he's having a beer at Bike Week in Daytona Beach. Everyone is gathering, having a good time. No one has masks on. DeSantis has got some problems on foreign policy, but if you look at him, he looks like a leader right here, and it's pretty amazing. And in fact, you're not going to believe this, Dr. Paul, but they're begrudgingly, let's look at that next clip. They're begrudgingly starting to understand that he was right all along. This is from Axios. Even some Florida Democrats are wondering whether Governor Ron DeSantis' widely panned COVID response might turn out to be right. And the article talks about Florida's unemployment rate is at 5%. California is almost double that. Texas is way up. The real estate market is booming in Florida. And I saw an article earlier about how restaurants are flocking to Florida to reopen. They've been shut down in New York. They're moving the operation down to Florida to open up. So it's begrudging recognition that the lockdowns were a bad idea.
Yeah, the information is out there. People hopefully will be persuaded. We'll move over and take time to do a few of these, but follow up to what you just reported. I want to mention what was happening at the other end of the country, and that's the LA teachers came out with a statement. And this is pragmatic. I mean, this is not philosophical. This is real practical politics, what they're advising. LA Teachers Union, they're the ones who say, you don't go back to work, it's dangerous and all that stuff. It's dangerous to them. Yeah. And they've kept it closed more than anybody else. And here we have LA Teachers Union says that unsafe to return to schools. That's their position. That's no surprise. But it's urging its members to hide vacation plans because, well, guess what? They get reported when they're having a fancy dinner at a closed restaurant. So, but to literally put it in, you know, that shows. If we can't beat these guys, there's something wrong. I mean, this can't be too smart.
Yeah, it can't be.
So, do you have any more
there? Well, actually,
there?
since we're in LA, I'm going to do a quick one here. This goes into our category of unbelievable hypocrisy. Let's skip the one quote, the one clip, and go straight to the. I hesitate to say it, but it happens to be Sean Hannity's tweet. Not my favorite person, but this is really amazing. Over the weekend, Los Angeles authorizes the city to cut electricity to businesses that defy the shutdown. There's a Tin Horn Flats, I think, is a bar, and they've said, no, we're going to stay open. We're going to go ahead and stay open. They're cutting off their electricity. So much for property rights. Cutting off their electricity. Now, hang on, just stay up there for a second, because I want to go there. I want to contrast this, Dr. Paul. Look at these folks over here having a meal out. Average-looking folks, T-shirt, enjoying themselves. They're going to get in big trouble. But go to the next clip. This is, I think it was last night, a music award. I don't know, the Grammys. And look at this, Dr. Paul. These are the elites. These are the people. These are the movers and shakers. And Robbie Starbuck tweeted this. There's a mask mandate in LA where violations can carry a $1,000 fine or 6 months in jail. But apparently COVID isn't a concern if you're a celebrity at the Grammys. Celebrity parties are no big deal. But if you have a family party in LA, the mayor can turn off your power. These are the kinds of things that are helping us win this kind of hypocrisy.
That's right out of Soviet Union.
Yeah.
They use economic thing. They get you dependent. You have a job and you have food stamps and you live. But if you don't toe the line or express yourself in a different way, they don't grab you and beat you up and break your feet. What they do is they say, well, you've lost your job and you're not going to get any food. So it's economic punishment, and that's what that is.
Yeah.
So, okay, I have one here, and then I think we'll think about closing up pretty soon here. But this one comes from New York, essentially. Because there's a problem up there, on ethics and all that. And there was the problem with why people died more so in their nursing home than anything else. And then there was a hint that maybe some governor came along and insisted they do it, and it won't hurt a thing. And as a consequence of that major medical decision made by a politician, ended up people dying. And that was bad, but maybe it was people can make mistakes. But something else happened on that, and that is that the governor, I think his name is Cuomo, he says, that might not look good on my resume.
Yeah.
So he decided, and a staffer, and I think this is the way this came out, the staffer that participated in this, what they had to do is hide it. So that they didn't have the evidence that people actually died, not as many. They changed the number. And at the beginning, they boosted the numbers because it made the world know that it's much more serious than it really was, and they got bigger in reimbursement. But this one was fitting the position that we need less people because it looks like we didn't manage things well enough. But this is another, inconsistency, hypocrisy. They were talking about where's the advice come? And I believe that so often bad things come from philosophical arguments maybe made 100, 200 years ago. They're following a precise philosophy of authoritarianism. But in this case, we're talking about the ethics of how to handle lockdown and what you can do and how you cover things up. So it says, professor of government ethics helped cover up COVID nursing home deaths. Oh. And I think he was associated with the NYU, and he taught ethics. Oh. And there's some things that in the last several decades that where things changed in medicine, there was always an emphasis on ethics, but it had a little bit to do with the Hippocratic Oath, the ethics that were preached there. But their ethics is knowing how to fill out a form and all this stuff that just was driving me nuts. But here, this is what they're doing. Their idea, their definition of ethics is probably, there's a little bit of cynicism. Whatever's good for the state is ethical.
Yeah.
So what do you have?
Some quick clips here. Let's just look at the next one real quick to have a laugh at the end. Of course, Fauci made the rounds over the weekend as usual, and now it says he's suggesting the CDC may change its guidance to reflect that just 3 feet of social distancing is okay in school. So I guess the virus, Dr. Paul, is getting tired, it's getting old, it now can only jump 3 feet instead of 6 feet. And here's just a reminder, I haven't done this in a while. This is where we are as a few states in the country on the coronavirus. Let's look at these next 3 clips in pretty quick. So here are daily deaths in Florida. They are plummeting even though Florida is wide open. Here's the next one. I think daily deaths in California, it looks almost identical. That curve is almost identical. California lockdown, cut off your electricity, Florida wide open. And then the third one, let's look at Texas. And I just put this out there because I would urge my fellow Texans, take a look at this. Don't watch the mainstream media with doom and gloom reports. Look at the numbers in Texas. The new cases are in free fall, and they continue to be. We can't predict the future. There will be more viruses and there will be more pathogens in the world, but right now you can go out and you can live your life a little bit, and you should, because it's awfully beautiful down here in Brazoria County.
Okay, I'm gonna tell one more little one, then I'm gonna close.
Okay.
If you have anything else, and this I think is in Nevada, and it has to do with a school senior, and he himself is he's biracial, a school senior. He's being threatened by, but his mother made the report, being able to graduate for failing. You know, with all this activity, I'm sure he's been exposed to the right thing, but failing a critical race theory class. You know, I missed that class. I don't know, maybe you got to take that course. Theory race class at his school because he refused to confess about his white dominance. He's a biracial student. And he wouldn't confess as part of the course requirement, the boy's mother claimed. Well, that made the glass a little less full. So we're going to continue to work on making that glass for liberty fuller each day. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are still anxious for that, and a lot of people know that that's the only answer to this monstrosity that we're dealing with worldwide. Because the philosophy, and I think the philosophy that we're looking at, the authoritarian philosophy, at least 200 years they started talking about this. Prior to Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin, all of them, they had their philosophers that they were following. So this is something that is going to last, but it's only going to be answered when the philosophy of liberty gets a louder voice. And I don't understand why we don't do a better job, all of us who are on the side of liberty, because it's so wonderful. It's a moral principle, and it works. It creates the opportunity for peace and prosperity. And when you look at all the evidence, the more socialistic you are, the poorer the people are, and the more they suffer. And yet we continue to experiment with it and become more authoritarian and beating up people, and then all this confusion. And then we pretend that we can tell people how to live. We pretend to tell people how to make their own money and how they should be able to spend it. And then we pretend that we are so good at this that we're going to tell the world how to live too. Well, I think it's time for us to be more confident about the principles of liberty and try to spread this message in a very deliberate manner so that it's attractive and that we can persuade others to join us. I want to thank everybody for having joined us today and joining us routinely. And please come back to the Liberty Report soon.